and a tribal kind of experience. The basic tenets in most Jewish practice is the relationship between God, the Torah, the scrolls of the 5 books of Moses, and Israel, the people of Israel, not the country of Israel necessarily, but the people Israel. I happen to serve at a independent liberal congregation from a humanist perspective, where we don't use God in our liturgy at all. We feel that people should have their own feelings about what God is, and to have a liturgy that dictates a certain type of God doesn't work for our congregation. We also don't practice interventional God or a miracle working God. That we believe in the power of humanity and science and all those other things that go along with that. There's a thought that there's only one type of Jew sometimes. It's not true. Oftentimes religious Jews, people that practice religiously or traditional or religious practices, are thought of as the real Jews. That's not true. The example I use is if you go to Home Depot or wherever, Lowe's or wherever, and you say, I want to paint my room blue. And the person says, what type of blue? And you're like, just blue. We're like that. There's many different shades of blue. There are many different shades of Judaism. Some of the major groups are Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist, Renewalist, Humanist. The list goes on. And then there's lots of people that are secular Jews that don't practice any of the religious practices, but they practice Judaism as a culture, and they celebrate the holidays and other things like that. So one of the myths is all Jews believe in or pray to God, which I told you is not true. People have complicated relationships with God for lots of reasons, and God is a concept and a word in Judaism. It's not necessarily the end-all be-all for specific Jews. It's also said that 2 Jews, 10 opinions, so that's pretty much what you're going to get. You're getting this Jew's opinion of what's going on, and I'll try to do the best to cover other stuff. There's also a myth that Hebrew is required to be Jewish, that you need to know Hebrew to be Jewish. Some of the prayers are written in Hebrew. Much of our liturgy is written in English, and much of the modern liturgy is written in English. Some of the prayers are in Aramaic. Hebrew is not a prerequisite to being Jewish. Some Jews know Hebrew, some Jews don't. It's just the way it is. Also, an unwavering acceptance of everything that Israel does, the country of Israel, is often thought to be that's all Jews believe that, and that's not true either. It's a complex issue. There are many Jews around the world that believe in the people of Israel and love, like myself, love people that live in Israel and struggle with governmental policies and the treatment of people in Israel right now. And I feel very strongly about that. So to say all Jews love Israel, yes, just complicated love sometimes, you know. We're Jewish people are people that are evolutionary and creative. We've always evolved to wherever we're living at the time and whatever we're doing. After the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, the Judaism shifted towards Rabbinic Judaism, which is what we've been practicing for a long time, where the rabbis became leaders. A rabbi for us is a leader, a teacher. That's what it means. It's taken on the kind of Christian trappings of being a pastor or a minister, but it really is about being a teacher, teaching Judaism. There's lots of mystic traditions within Judaism, contemplative practice, something that I practice a lot. The mystics believe that there's something bigger than this concept of God. It's called the Ein Sof, the without end, and that whatever that is in everything, all nature, everything in the earth. It's the practice that I feel most comfortable with. And one of the things that I really welcome, if people have questions about, are kind of the attitudes about anti-Semitism and stereotypes. I ask that you ask questions of what you've heard. The best way to kind of break stereotypes is to talk about what the truth is behind them, and why people might feel that way. And in the world that we're living in right now, like in this moment right now, there's a lot of anti-Semitic trope about this virus, about other things, and it's really important we're just able to talk about it openly. I don't know how much time that was, but does that sound good, Geneva? Everyone okay with that? I'm more than willing to answer any questions about Judaism in general, but I think it's important to see that Judaism isn't just a religion, and that people identify in different ways.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
So, Deborah, are you okay with going next, or Deborah,
Sure.
are you there?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. So, I'll go ahead and just give a brief introduction for you. Okay. Dr. Deborah Clark Vance retired from McDaniel College in Westminster, Maryland, where she was an associate professor in intercultural communication and media studies and the department chair. She moved to Cincinnati in 2016 and holds a PhD from Howard University, Department of Communication and Culture. She now participates on the Cincinnati Festival of Faith Steering Committee as well as Equation. She's been a member of the Baha'i Faith for many years and is on the local spiritual assembly of the Baha'is of Cincinnati. And she is going to share a PowerPoint with us. If anybody has any issues seeing that, can everybody see that? Yeah, good, okay.
Okay, so the problem is I can't see everything when all these people are on here. So there are a lot of misconceptions. I've come up with 11. The first one is people believe that the Baha'i faith is a fusion of various religions, that it's just borrowing from various religions. And actually the teaching is that is of progressive revelation, that the word of God is one word, though the speakers were many. So Baha'is believe that all the great messengers were giving the same spiritual teachings, but different social teachings. And Baha'is believe that Baha'u'llah is addressing the teachings today to the entire planet. Second big one is that Baha'i faith is an Islamic sect. And indeed, the faith has been officially legally recognized in Islamic countries. It did emerge in Persia in the 19th century. So it does have roots in Shia Islam, similar to roots, you could say, Christianity has in Judaism. Baha'is have been imprisoned and martyred for the past 170 years because of opposition by powerful Islamic clerics that have seen it as a threat, and in some cases still regard Baha'i as an Islamic sect. Let's see, going to the next slide. How does that happen? Sorry, here we go. Another confusion is people hear the word Baha'i and they think of B'nai B'rith, which is a Jewish organization dedicated to social and educational betterment of Jews. The fact is that Baha'u'llah was exiled in, 1863 to the prison city of Akka, which at that time was the where exiles were sent out of, it's in the Ottoman Empire, that's where you were basically sent to die, and it was where the most heinous criminals were sent. Akka is near Mount Carmel and Haifa. Mount Carmel is in Haifa. So Baha'u'llah lived out his life there, and it became the center of the Baha'i faith. Back then, about 85 years before the state of Israel was founded. At that time, it was Palestine, well, it was part of Syria. Oh, I skipped something, sorry. That one? 3. Oops, I skipped 2 of them. Oh, sorry, I skipped ahead, sorry. I have my fact checker here in the background. There's a misconception that I hear people say, oh, it's just about prayer and meditation. Well, that is a misconception because the Baha'i writings, yes, there are mystical writings, but there's also that deal with spiritual reality and spiritual growth. But there's also a very elegant administrative order that was designed by the founder of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah. And this administrative order is that we have no clergy, so you aren't going to find I'm an individual right now speaking about the Baha'i faith. I'm a member of the Baha'i local assembly, but I'm not clergy. So in every location where Baha'is reside, we live according to this administrative order. If there are 9 or more Baha'is, we elect a local assembly from among our members. And what else? I think I'm getting into more details in that later. Around the world, there's minor particulars according to cultural differences in, you know, language and so on, and custom, food custom and that sort of thing. But other than that, the order is the same around the world, but that's another slide. So I want to get ahead of myself. The misconception that Baha'is are not involved in social action. The fact is that the Baha'i international community has a permanent seat at the United Nations and consultative status with the United Nations Economic and Social Council, and is active in sustainable development, equality of women and men, disparity between wealth and poverty, economic disparity, and so on. Also, the son of Baha'u'llah, whose name was Abdul Baha, which means servant of God, visited the United States in 1912, and at that time, he required Baha'is to integrate in the 2 southernmost cities that he visited, which were Baltimore and Washington, D.C., which at the time were still practicing segregation, legal segregation or de facto segregation. And also the thing is that it seems that we're not involved in social action sometimes because it's not coming from top down. Our social action is grassroots. So they arise from local decisions rather than national directives. And I did that one. This one is kind of, we hear it a lot. It's just a cult. There's not a whole lot to say about that except people disparage what they don't understand. And I was starting to talk about this a minute ago, that the Baha'i Faith doesn't vary around the world. You could go to any Baha'i community anywhere in the world and you would find the same practices. First of all Baha'is follow the covenant, which is that if you accept that Baha'u'llah is who he says he is, which is the messenger of God for today, you will follow his law. So those are the 2 fundamental, let's say, requirements of becoming a Baha'i. So in following Baha'u'llah, we accept the authority of those who Baha'u'llah appointed, which was first his son, and then the grandson, who then established the Universal House of Justice, which is now the ultimate judge, and that's an elected body. So there are no individual humans who are spiritual leaders at this point, just are elected local, national, and international elected bodies of 9 individuals. And the other thing that we practice around the world, besides electing assemblies, is we all observe the monthly feast, which is, I guess you could say, similar to a Sabbath, except it's once in every 19 days. And we all give to our funds, which are local, national, and international, and that is not tithe, but it's all voluntary. The misconception that we have spiritual leaders, which we do not, and I mentioned that a moment ago. We have the elected bodies, and the elections happen by secret ballot without nominations and without campaigning. We're directed to elect the people that we think have the, I guess, character to be, to participate at that, on that body, which is a consultative body. And the assemblies elect among them will elect officers who only have a role as member of the assembly during the assembly meeting. I'm an assembly member. I happen to be the corresponding secretary, but I don't have any authority at the moment as a corresponding secretary or as anything else. It's just a job that I perform for the assembly at their direction. And in our consultation, the goal is always to search for truth and we reach decisions that must accord with the teaching. So if we have any disagreement, we will consult the writings of Baha'u'llah, Abdu'l-Baha, Shoghi Effendi, and the Universal House of Justice for the ultimate answers to whatever dispute or snag we're having in our discussion. There is this, and this isn't so common, but we have our monthly meeting is known as a feast, and our months are 19 days. So the feast is only once. Oh, I'm sorry, this is a fast. I'm gonna get to the feast. So the misconception, we have a 19-day fast, so that our months are 19 days, and the 19-day fast is one month each year. And we refrain from eating and drinking from sunrise to sunset. And it's primarily a spiritual fast. It's a time of meditation, prayer, introspection, rededication, and the goal is to renew awareness of our true inner eternal spiritual selves. And we can eat as much as we want between sunset and sunrise, but I don't think we do. It would be a mistake, but it's allowable. And again, it's all voluntary anyway. We don't have fast police who are going to come and check and make sure we're not eating or drinking. The feast, I was starting to talk about that because it's called a feast, and this is our monthly meeting that happens once a Baha'i month, which is once every 19 days. And it is also primarily spiritual, but some people think it's a food fest. You come to your first feast, you're thinking, man, there's going to be a whole lot of food there. Well, that's not the case. There is food, but it could just be a glass of water. It depends on who's hosting it and what they're able to supply. And the feast is our regular devotional, administrative, and social event. So that is that. And finally, I think this is my last one, the misconception that we have places of worship. And people are sometimes kind of surprised to think we don't really have a place. There are temples. In North America, the only one is up in the Chicago area, and that was actually the Baha'i temples on the continents, and even in localities that are starting to be built, are meant for prayer and meditation for anyone. They're places where you go and pray. They're completely quiet, and they're not used. So in the Chicago area, it's in Wilmette, in the Chicago suburb. The Wilmette Baha'is do not use the Baha'i temple for anything. It's not for them. They have to get their own place, or they meet in each other's homes if they don't have a center. Local communities, on the other hand, so here in Cincinnati, we do have a center. Yellow Springs, Columbus have a center in this area. Even though there are a number of Baha'i assemblies and groups throughout Southwest Ohio, having a center, having our own regular center depends on local circumstances. So we're fortunate to have a center here, and others can rent or buy a place for regular meetings, or meet in each other's homes, or whatever works for them. So that is that, and I will stop sharing the screen, and I'll answer questions about any of that or other things at the time.
Great, thank you so much. We do have a couple questions, but I think I'm gonna save them to the end. Just let everybody speak first. So Shireen, are you able to go next? Shireen, are you still there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay. So Shireen is from Cincinnati. She was raised in an Indian Zoroastrian family, enriched with beautiful culture and traditions passed down from her parents and grandparents. She attended Ohio State University for college and graduate school in public health and health administration. And she currently works at OSU James Cancer Hospital in oncology clinical research. So I will let you take it away.
Thanks, Geneva. So I'm Shireen. I'm here to discuss Zoroastrianism today with you guys. Very similar to what Rabbi David said, I would say there's a lot of shades of blue in Zoroastrianism as well. There are people on all kind of like on all different areas of the spectrum, like ranging from pretty orthodox to people that kind of follow the religion more culturally, in a more secular way. And our religion also similarly is a very kind of cultural religion because it's so like deeply rooted in like Iran traditions and rituals, but also like when our group was persecuted from Iran and we moved to India, we are actually just like very kind of embedded and enriched with like Indian cultures and customs. And so there are like Zoroastrians like kind of around the world that followed the religion in different ways, like whatever it means to them. Some who follow the text might follow the text very seriously, and others who are more there for like the cultural, like kind of annual biannual traditions. A common misconception is that Zoroastrians are fire worshipers, and that's because all Zoroastrian temples actually have like a fire that's in them at all times, like whether it's like a small like oil candle or whether it's like an actual like fire temple kind of thing. And in our religion, so that's a misconception, but in our religion, fire actually like represents like the light and enlightening of God, but also like the warmth of God. And just kind of is there as like a palpable, but also like tangible reminder of like your connection to like God and like kind of living a selfless life with purpose and finding your purpose on this planet and how you can kind of further that in your lifetime, whatever your purpose might be. Another, I would say, common misconception is that because our religion is so old, also it's like it's considered the first monotheistic religion. So because it's such an old religion, like I've heard a misconception that kind of our religious texts are like incomplete and like don't really like seem as maybe robust as other religions. But we have a few different religious texts. One of them is the Avesta, which is kind of like the Bible of our religion, like our main text that we read out of. And the other one is what we call the Gathas, and that's kind of part of the Avesta. And that really, in the Gathas, it's basically just a series of like hymns and psalms and all of this kind of like guidance on moral behavior and like living a righteous life, like your responsibilities, like your self-determination as a Zoroastrian, but also as like a humanistic like member of this planet. And it's just like songs of like worship and empowerment and things like that, which I feel really like bring everything together for us. And we don't have that many, I think, that have been, like a lot of us have not seen it translated into English, but from just growing up with religion classes and everything, we have picked up on the meanings of these, and it's actually like really beautiful and like always like kind of everlasting and like relevant to us, like since we were kids and up to now. Yeah.
Great. Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so last we have Reverend Brian Morgan. You still here, Brian?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you okay. So Brian has been a practitioner of magic for the better part of 25 years. After having a series of psychic experiences off and on from the time he was 2 years old, he discovered witchcraft when he was just 14, and from there began a lifelong quest for knowledge of the great mysteries. He runs and operates the Ohio Valley Pagan Society, which hosts pagan events and does charity runs. The goal of the organization is to bring pagans together and help spread knowledge on paganism. Brian has had several published articles in magazines and has been featured on radio programs. He currently spends most of his time working on his various art projects, focusing on theurgy magic and raising his 2 daughters.
Right.
So take it back.
All right. So paganism is, it's a personal spiritual experience. It's different for everybody that practices it. It's an umbrella term that encompasses various different traditions. It's very similar from what our rabbi just spoke about earlier. Today we kind of like evolved from like the old ancient religions, from the cultures, from like say Greece and Rome and the Celts, Norse, which you know as Vikings, and even Egyptians. It's a polytheistic religion, so we have multiple gods that we follow. And will we so if you think about the European religion, that's what we're mostly derived around. If you look in the dictionary or on Google, it'll tell you that it's one of the non-Abrahamic religions, but that just narrows it down that it's not Christian, Muslim, or Jewish, which would also encompass, Hinduism and a lot of others, but we don't really incorporate that, that those are their own thing. So like I said, the cultures that I just mentioned, those really are what we strive around. Well, you'll find the most majority practice that. And if you've heard the term Wiccan, Wicca is a modern manifestation. It's like a blending of cultures. It's those that practice witchcraft. It's the name of the religion. Witchcraft is embedded into paganism a lot, but not everybody who's pagan practices what you would call magic or witchcraft. Witchcraft and magic, it's basically the same term. We just call it two different things. But if you think about like back in the ancient times, and you had tribes, you had your priests, or like the Celts had their druids that were practitioners of magic, or the lawgivers and whatnot. And then like cultures like Egyptian and Greece, you had several different people that practiced what you would call sort of like magic or witchcraft. From like the daily peasants all the way up to the high priests of the temple. They all had different forms of it and what they did, this daily practice. And today, it's kind of more moved towards what we would call folk magic. Simple little things like how you make your teas for to make you healthy and whatnot, to get rid of things, or carrying a rabbit's foot, stuff like that. A lot of misconceptions about the idea of magic and witchcraft and casting spells is that it's meant specifically for harming people, and that's just not the case. I mean, sure, there is documentation of that, or people that do that, but that's not the idea of it. The idea of it is that, it's to empower yourself, to better yourself. Because see, when we look at our gods, as, we don't worship them or bow down to them. We look at them as role models, or people of inspiration. We read, these mythologies, and they're like our guides to a way to better live your life. So we would like, read a mythology from whatever culture we follow, and that would be, we were like, well, what would Odin do? Or, what would Bridget do? And we would look at that as a model for inspiration. We don't, blame our gods for bad things happening, but we honor them, and we give them thanks, we give them offerings and stuff like that. A lot of people have different practices in our religion. It's wide spectrum. There's not like one set of rules or one book of rules. We don't have, just one doctrine that everybody follows. And we also don't have, an official hierarchy. We have people that, that are leaders, that are looked at leaders within, our religion. And that's because they decided to step up and bring people together, and people start looking at them as leaders. So, and then you start filling that role to bring, the people of the pagan faith together. So a lot of times you'll have people that, end up following, these same traditions. For example, with what we call it's heathen or Asatru, which is the religion of the Vikings, with Odin and Freya and Thor and those type of gods. They're growing to be an even bigger religion on their own now, but it is still considered a pagan religion. So you'll have groups that follow that try to encompass, what they do, well, like the ancient ancestors did in their society. Because really, when you think back about it in pagan cultures, it was more about the tribe and the culture of that, the tribe of that culture, or various different tribes. So, it was like a group effort that came together to honor these gods. Another misconception that I need to touch base on is the idea that we're Satanists or we're Satanism. Now, there are Satanists out there that do practice magic and witchcraft, but they're not pagan, because pagans don't work with the Christian mythology. Satan or Lucifer is part of the Christian mythology, but most Satanists are actually atheists and don't actually believe in the actual deity known as Satan, unless you're Luciferian. Luciferians kind of believe in that as an entity, but they work with the angel aspect, the angelic aspect of Lucifer. But again, that's not part of paganism. So, and because, we have, like I said, a lot of the gods are cultural related. A lot of times people want to put, their ideas on what paganism is, or their, try to put Christianity into paganism, and it's, it's two separate religions. It's like something we get, accused of all the time, but it's just completely not the case. So, and the idea of going back to Wicca, Wicca encompasses this creed. It's this harm none, which is, do unto others, it's basically the golden rule. Do unto others as you would do unto yourself. And then, and like I said, Wicca was formed in the 1940s and 50s by a guy named Gerald Gardner, who had a revitalization of witchcraft and started bringing it more to the public, started writing more about it. And a lot of the ideas that we have about witchcraft today come from that. They're not as ancient as we'd like to think. So, and today it's more, like I said, it's a blending of cultures. It's what Wicca is. It's practicing witchcraft, practicing magic, working with several different gods. But, not everybody who is pagan, like I said before, practices magic and witchcraft. Some people are just into the cultural aspect of it, honoring the gods, honoring their ancestors, giving thanks to those, but we all do follow the same holidays, which is, our holidays are the spring and fall equinoxes in the summer and winter solstices. And then you have the cross quarters, which is which is Halloween. We call Samhain, which is a Celtic term. And then and Samhain is actually how, when we honor our ancestors, we honor our dead. And it's during that time we usually will honor the dead that have fallen through that year, and we help them to cross over. And then another cross quarters, which is equal to that, is what we call it. The Celtic term is called Beltana, or some know it as Beltane, which is in May 1st to be exact. And it's a fire festival and the fertility festival, but it's also a cross quarters where we also honor the dead. But this is more of a life festival, where Samhain is more of honoring the dead. So, and those are our holidays, and it's all I got at the moment. I'm sure I'll have some questions later. I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Brian. So we do have several questions that came in. The first one, it looks like, is for David. The question is, when did your form of Judaism begin?
That's a great question. So our Judaism began 40 years ago, about when my senior Rabbi Robert Barr of Congregation Beth Adam, started Congregation Beth Adam. He had grown up in the conservative movement. He was ordained as a Reform rabbi, but he was connected to humanist Judaism. And it's really a blending between the attitude of having a rabbi, which humanist Jews don't usually have, and the idea of humanism as far as the liturgy not having the word God in it or the concept of God in it, but the liturgy is written on our own. So it's been about 40 years. We're actually a unique congregation in the whole world. There are people that practice humanist Judaism. There's people that practice Reform Judaism. There's secular Jews. We're kind of like in the middle of all that. And actually, we've built our school, our religious school, around that concept of thinking and questions and using science and faith and bringing everything together. Is that good enough? Yeah? No? Whoever asks a question?
Great. There's actually a second one for you. Is there a line between what is culture and what is religion in Judaism?
Yes, I think the line is ritual practice, traditional ritual practice. I think people that would say that they're religious Jews practice certain types of religion. They say certain prayers. They do certain prayers over certain activities. I think culturally, a cultural Jew, I think we're all cultural Jews, and some of us are religious, but religion's a very small piece of Judaism. Most of it is, the culturehood, the way of being in the world, going what Shireen was talking about, the kind of the good things that we do, the teachings, the aspects of being involved in this world, and doing good works. So yeah, I think so some people are religious, some people go to temple or synagogue and they say the prayers and they do traditional things. And most Jews, I would say, are secular Jews that are trying to figure out where they fall. And it's okay. Those two can work together as long as people that are more traditional don't make people that are less traditional feel less Jewish. So it's a roundabout answer to a really good question. So thank you.
Great, thank you. The next question is for Deborah. Do you not consider, and I might pronounce this name wrong, Shoghi Effendi during his life to be a spiritual leader? And the reference to this was on slide 8 of your PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, thanks. Shoghi Effendi had a unique role. He was considered the guardian of the Baha'i faith in the interim while the administrative order was being developed. So in a sense, yes, he's a spiritual leader, but at the same time, we have a sort of probably a different conception of what a spiritual leader is than maybe is common in the world. I don't know. So for example, Abdul Baha, who was the son of Baha'u'llah, was considered our perfect exemplar of how to be. Very self-effacing. He didn't want photographs of himself, even though there are photographs. And the same with Shoghi Effendi. There are very few photographs of him. And when he came to the United States, people called him the return of Christ, basically. And he was really almost angry about that. And he had to gently say, no, but Baha'u'llah is the one who brought the teachings. I'm the exemplar. You should be as I am, which is he was a humble individual. And in that sense, yes, he's a servant leader. Same with Shoghi Effendi, they're servant leaders. And as the head of the faith until he passed away, which was an interesting sort of strange time, because when he passed away, the Universal House of Justice wasn't in place yet. There were 3 years when nobody, except for his appointed helpers, he called them hands. They were the people that helped create or helped grow the assemblies around the world. They together, how many were there? I think, 27 individuals for several years worked together to create, to hold the Baha'i faith together except there was one who was, I guess, sort of a Judas kind of character who decided that he was the next guardian, and there was no next guardian. And he was kind of cut out of the loop. And the Universal House of Justice was thereafter elected. And since then, we really do not have spiritual leader. That's a great question. It's probably controversial. And again, as I'm just an individual and we don't have clergy, I am giving you my understanding based on my study and experience.
Great, thank you so much, Deb. So the next question is for everyone on the panel. What is your belief in gathering during this time? Do you think as religious leaders, it's your duty to keep your people safe by limiting religious gatherings? If so, what ways are you using to continue worship other than face-to-face gathering? During this time, how has your faith helped you, and has this time given you some insight? So anyone who would like to take that.
I'd be happy to go.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would say that definitely at this time, like considering coronavirus, I would say it's like our duty as religious leaders or as any kind of like public figure to ensure that we're keeping people safe first and foremost, because like humanity is at risk like during a time like this, and like all religions really are like for the betterment, and like just like all religions have humanism at the center of them. And like in order to kind of honor that humanism, we need to like keep people like not in gatherings right now. I know like in our religion, Zoroastrianism, we just had our new year on March 21st. It's always on the first day of spring. And that's usually like a really big celebration where like everybody, like not just like the Indian Zoroastrians, but also like Iranian Zoroastrians, it's a really big celebration. People all gather in, like with their families, friends, and like really large groups, and just across the world that was canceled this year naturally, just like given the context, you know? And I think that was absolutely the right decision. And I would say religion-wise, like how our faith has kind of helped us during the time of coronavirus. So there's a word that kind of like circulates a lot like in our religion and probably in other religions too, but for us it's Asha, it's A-S-H-A, and that means righteousness. And it's kind of just like something that's ingrained like in several different prayers. It comes up, it's like a word, it's one of like the days of our calendar and stuff. And I would say like if you're following the word righteousness and like using your good mind, like the kind of texts guide you to do, like you would know to kind of like keep your people safe and keep your community and world safe, like you would need to kind of like follow the basically like the health guidances and like the science behind all this, right? And so I would say like science and religion don't necessarily have to like intersect here, but we definitely have been able to like find that peace, like knowing that like our religion does guide us to like do what's best for others, not just ourselves.
I can speak. Also, I mean, following up on Shireen, there's a principle in the Baha'i faith of the unity of science and religion. So we very much use science in all of our consultations. And so based on that, yes, Baha'is have even, it's been suggested nationally and regionally to cancel some of the big meetings. There was a big one canceled of hundreds of people. We're gonna go up to the house of worship from this area in Wilmette, hundreds of people. And instead, no, those were canceled, but locally we've used Zoom a whole lot. We also have Nowruz, like the Zoroastrians and the Persians. So we did that. We had a Nowruz gathering on Zoom, and we even had people somebody from Puerto Rico who came and celebrated with us. Of course, we had we didn't have food, but we did socialize and we had some devotions. We had our feast the other day, this weekend, we had a feast, and we also had a devotional, and we had an assembly meeting. So we've done those 4 things online. So I don't know if that answers the question, but yes, it is important to keep people safe by limiting the gatherings, and we're following the directives of the scientific community. And in some ways, these conversations on Zoom are more intimate. I think we're finding that we're kind of forced to see each other and talk to each other in some of them. So it hasn't been, how has your faith helped? I guess sharing devotion, in our devotionals, we usually read prayers and writings and passages and talk about them. So what do they mean to each of us? So we're sharing our thoughts.
Great. Did anyone else want to comment on that before we move on? Or
Yeah, I'll go ahead and mention something too. Is that we've been going through the similar thing. Like we also just had spring equinox, which we call Astara, which we were supposed to a lot of us were supposed to celebrate. We have our personal covens that we work with, and then we have the bigger community that we work with, and of course just for the sake of all, we decided to cancel all that because we're with paganism, we're actually kind of used to, practicing at home anyway. So we were able to, do our own personal things, but still stay in contact. But, as spiritual leaders within our community, we all decided to just, cancel everything, keep, try to keep the community together. And we also tried to look at doing, what can we do to help the community on a whole level, because everything that we wanted to do, we ended up not being able to do because we looked at trying to bring people supplies and collect supplies for people that can't get out, or go to the grocery store for people that have that are older or have immune deficiency disorders or whatnot, that can't go out. But the more we tried that, the more regulations they put on us, and then there was only like so much we could do. So right now, I mean, we're still doing what we can on our end to, help the community out as a whole. So that's what we've been doing, staying home like we're ordered to, and letting everybody else know they should do the same. So.
great, thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead. Do you want to go to the next question? No. So we've
Did you have something to add?
Yeah, we've had a similar response. We've been using Zoom a lot. I mean, our congregation, Beth Adam, has had an online streaming service for like 10 years, 11 years. So we stream around the world on Friday nights anyways, but we've used Zoom a lot. And I'm the director of education. So I literally have play dates with kids, which is a lot of fun for me. I get to play with them. I think it's Legos and tea parties tomorrow. I'm not sure. I have to get my right stuff together. But we're allowed in the state of Ohio, where we are right now, we're allowed to go into work because we're essential personnel, but we've chosen as a staff to not, because our congregants can't go into work. So we've all scrambled for the last 2 weeks to figure out how to work from home. And technology has been super helpful. We have multiple Zoom connections to people. We probably have 7 or 8 different things going on right now. And I found my own faith, my own mystic faith, is I found meditation and contemplative prayer really helpful, not only for myself, but for other people. So to share the ideas of kindness and compassion and love, especially as this could have a tendency to divide people instead of bring them together. And in my own personal life, it's, I get to spend time with my 3 kids, which has been really, really nice. Some rupture and repair, but we're working through it. But, I think it's about, I feel like in a weird way, this has stopped the world in a way that we're actually going to realize what is really important all along, which is loving the people close to you and being in relationships with people. I find Zoom fascinating, that people can be from all over the country. As I get used to it, it's also like a lot of up close talkers, because your head's always in the screen. So I'm just trying to figure out how to navigate that too. So thank you.
Thank you, David. The next question is for Deborah. If there are not 9 Baha'i in an area, does the monthly feast still occur as a small gathering or an independent event?
That's a good question. If you are 3 or more, you can register as a group, meaning you will get correspondence from the National Assembly. You're not required to do that. And also, having feast is a voluntary, attending feast is not obligatory to anybody. It is obligatory for the local assembly to establish feast and make sure that it's observed. But an assembly isn't going to force anybody. It's sort of like going to church. Nobody forces you to go to church. And so some communities of 3 Of course, if you're only one, you could observe feast. If you're two, you could also. So yeah, you can do it. And it does happen, but not always. I hope that answers it.
Great, thank you. The next question is for Shireen. I think many people do not realize that when Zoroastrianism was the state religion of Persia, that King Cyrus was the one who released the Jews, and some don't realize that the 3 wise men who visited Jesus at his birth, I guess they're implying were also Zoroastrianism. So the question is whether Zoroastrians accept converts during this current age of history.
So yes, I think that Zoroastrianism does accept conversion, but it also, I think, depends on like which shade of blue you're kind of talking to, like what area of the world you're talking to a Zoroastrian in, just depending on like their own worldview of like how they see their religion and like who, you know. But I would say in the United States and definitely like in the Western Hemisphere, and also I think just generally around the world, it's kind of shifting more this way, but conversion I think is definitely accepted at this point, and we do know several people that have converted. But I think in traditional India, maybe our grandparents like 80 years ago might have said that doesn't really happen, you know, so it again depends on who you're asking.
Great, thank you. The next question is for the whole panel. What rituals and observances does your tradition have when a community member dies? Does anyone want to take that?
I can go first. So when a community member dies, there's, first of all, there's no cremation. The body needs to be buried within a day's, 24-hour, no more than that journey from where you die. So you need to be buried. I guess, you know, we can quibble about if you fly, but you know, the idea is to be not to go great distance from where you die. The community gathers at the gravesite for congregational prayer. There is no cremation. The body is wrapped in silk and prepared and wrapped in silk. There's also a ring involved. I don't know if I'm forgetting anything. Oh, and so when the community gathers for the prayer for the departed, it is a community prayer. We usually don't have prayers where we all speak at the same time. And in this case, everybody speaks in unison. It's a specific prayer that was revealed by Baha'u'llah, and we're all there. Well, actually, we don't speak in unison. We were all there at the prayer. So when the prayer is recited, I think I've only been to a couple of Baha'i funerals, so I haven't, and it has been a while.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add to that?
I'll go ahead and go. Like I said before, ours is, you know, it's more of a personal preference of how you would like your funeral to go or how you want to be honored, you know, and if you want God's presence, you know, and you can have a priest there or a pagan priest there to help, you know, the soul, you know, ascend or get to the next world. A lot of pagans nowadays are trying to do what they're calling green burials, where you're buried without being embalmed and without a coffin. So the idea is that you're returning back to the earth, you know, and you're becoming one with the earth again. So it's starting to catch on. A lot of cemeteries won't let you do it simply because the cemetery, the ground will lower and it's harder for them to mow. And it's the only reason why they won't let you do it. So I know, like, I think Spring Grove is starting to let people do it now, and a few others. But so, you know, for us, it's again, it's a personal preference whether or not you want to be cremated or you want to have your body, you know, buried. And so, yeah.
Thank you.
I can go next. In Judaism, traditionally you're buried within 48 hours. There's no embalming usually, although there are many colors of blue, so there's people that do all sorts of stuff. We also, after the funeral, after the burial, there's some prayers that are said at the funeral. There's usually a eulogy given. And then there's a cemetery service where we lower the casket into the ground. Traditionally, it's a wood box with no nails, so it can go back to the earth. And then we put dirt on the casket. Comes from the tradition that we bury our own dead, usually. At least that's how I see it. And then we have a period of Shiva, which is sometimes up to 7 days where the family goes back to the home and people serve them food and they take care of them and the people come and visit. And in a more traditional system, you wouldn't leave the house for the 7 days and then you go out and leave. It's a really powerful way of mourning. It allows you to be together with your family and work through that. It allows the congregation or the community to be able to come to you in one place and have it happen. And then during the year, we say prayers for a whole year oftentimes. And then at the end of the year, 11 months, we do a cemetery. We put the gravestone in. So the gravestone usually doesn't go in right away. We wait 11 months to do it. So when you go back to the cemetery, it's a different experience.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else want to add anything? Okay. The next question is also for the whole panel. How is your religion conceptualizing the challenge of climate change? Does anyone want to take that?
I think my traditional role is to go first, so I'm going to jump in. We actually have an Office of Sustainable Development that's devoted to climate justice, and creating an unpolluted environment. And along with that, so as I said earlier, science and religion are united. We see science and religion as united and pay attention to what science is saying about pollution. And there's also a principle, the forerunner, the Baha'i Faith actually has twin manifestations, and the manifestation directly before Baha'u'llah was named the Gate. The name is the Bab, which meant the gate. Talked a lot about purity of water. That purity of water was extremely important for our, not just our physical, but our spiritual health, which is a fascinating concept to me. So Baha'is respect all life. And so we're very, a lot of Baha'is are very active in climate issues, climate justice, and so on. And I hope that answers the question.
My congregation has a climate justice component to it. We have people that are gathering to work on the social justice aspects of climate change. And in our school, we talk about it a lot with the kids because we see ourselves as stewards of the earth. It's often mistranslated in the Bible or the Torah, where it says that you should have dominion over the earth. In the book of Genesis, it doesn't mean dominion, it means stewardship. You should be taking care of the earth and the animals. So we have a lot of Jews that are looking at vegetarianism and veganism. We have a lot of people that are trying to think about how their practices can affect it. We have dietary restrictions, some people do, but there's the more modern kind of progressive, we're looking at what would eco-kosher look like. So what does it mean where your food comes from, where it's sourced from? And we're teaching our kids about restorative building, not changing the land, but making it better. The whole idea of sustainability is interesting, but I think restorative is the way to kind of move forward. So we want to teach our kids all about that sort of stuff. So we grow plants hydroponically in our school, and then we give them to soup kitchen. We learn about clean water, clean air, because we're seeing it. We're all interconnected. We've never seen an example like this in our lifetime, at least my lifetime, where the whole world is interconnected. And what's happening in one place is happening in another. And we're all suffering and being challenged in the same way. And I think the interesting thing for me is to see how the climate's reacting, how nature's reacting. I go for a walk now in my neighborhood. I live just outside of Cincinnati, and there are more birds, squirrels, like animals than I've ever seen, deer. I mean, it's just, I think you see the pictures in Boulder of like mountain lions wandering through the town, or in San Francisco of coyotes. I mean, like, we're a very small piece to this whole puzzle. We thought we were a big piece, and we're learning that we're a small piece. So I think climate change is a huge, huge issue in the Jewish population.
Paganism is, just the perspective on this from paganism. We're very similar into how the Native Americans view, the earth, that we're one with the earth, that, we're very animistic, to where we believe, like, everything, every organic thing has, a spirit or element to it. We are, we're very earth oriented. I'm sure you've heard that, a Wiccan or pagan, they're earth worshippers or something like that. It's not so much that we worship the earth, it's that we realize that, we're part of it, that all, as a few of you just said, that we're all connected. And we're part of the earth. We're not this separate thing that's not, part of, the environment. We make up our environment. So therefore, we have to take care of it. And also, our idea of, the universe, it's this whole idea of give and take. You don't take unless you're going to give back something of equal value. So you never take more than what you're going to use. So you become aware of you and your environment and your role in the environment and your effect on that environment. So we're able to, understand the idea of, how we affect the earth, how we affect those around us. So, climate change is something that's a really big topic in the pagan community, because, we want to see the earth heal. We want to see it, green again, and not, overpopulated and being destroyed, and try to live as an example to how you can, live without excess and accept, what you have and what you need, not more than what you need.
Thank you. The next question is for Deborah. Please explain the unity of religion as a core principle of the Baha'i religion. Does this mean that all religions are one?
Okay, I kind of covered this in my first misconception, and I think probably the easiest way to sort it out, or the way that I sort it out, is I understand that unity of faith and unity of religion are not the same thing. Baha'is believe that all the manifestations, all the great teachers, the manifestations of God, the messengers of God, brought the same spiritual teachings, and we're all united on that level. At the same time, there are different religions that formed around each and all of those manifestations, with different laws, in different cultures, in different places. So the religious doctrine varies. And what we're seeing, even with this panel, what I'm seeing here in Cincinnati with the Festival of Faith, is that the idea of unity of faith is pretty much accepted by more and more congregations as a truth. It's not that unusual that all the religious or the spiritual laws have a whole lot in common. So I think that's the way that we're one, is that the unity of faith. If we can sort it out that way. I hope that answers it.
Thank you. So this is actually a revisement to the climate question. I'm sorry I didn't see this earlier, Carla. Many religions that are based in ancient texts include assumptions about nature as a force that is potentially hostile to human enterprise and which should be dominated, managed, or controlled. How does your faith tradition revise ancient assumptions for today's challenges? Does anyone want to take that? No?
I'll give it a shot. All right, I'll try. I think that it's a very, the challenge when you look at kind of older text or where stuff comes from, it's a very small worldview. So a flood narrative or whatever else is, in a small region, and that's how it comes from. But I think that most of the religions that I've studied and the faiths that I've studied are really based in the idea that we are in sync with nature. Most of our religious faiths started as agrarian religions or had some sort of agrarian holdings, and at least in Judaism, it was, we were agrarian people, so the land kept us alive, and we honored the land through our sacrifice, through our prayers, through whatever else. And I think that that's a universal kind of feeling amongst us. And I think it's a very powerful thing. Nature can't be controlled. I mean, to be very honest, we're seeing how small we are in this world. And I think there is an idea that some cultures, modern religious perspectives, is that you can control nature. And we're seeing it in Ohio, actually, with some congregations that are choosing to hold prayer services even when they've been asked not to, and are spreading COVID rapidly through these religious communities. And unfortunately, it's affecting all of us. We have pretty strict rules here in Ohio, and most religious communities are practicing safely, and some communities aren't. So I think that nature itself is seen as a part of what we are.
And I can speak to that as well a little bit more. Yes, we're seen as caretakers. We're also, the concept of unity also extends to our relationship to plants and animals and minerals. That we're all, these are all various, they're referred to as kingdoms, the kingdom of plants, kingdom of animals, kingdom of minerals, and each has its own reality, each has its own sphere, and we're all connected, we're all united. And we need to I think be a steward is the word that is often used. David used it just a minute ago. So, and I don't, I guess, no, we don't see that we should be tearing it down, but we need to be working with it, not against nature. Understand it, let's say.
Hey, thank you.
I can add to that a little bit as well. So I think that David and Brian and probably Deborah also touched on this, but something that our religion definitely will focus on is not taking in excess and like moderation and kind of like living in concert with your surroundings. Like kind of like honoring your ecosystem and knowing that you're just one big part, like you're one small part of a big ecosystem. And that's exactly what COVID has been showing us as well. You're very right about that. And another thing is that religions actually will teach moderation. So like just everything that you do, like don't do more than like what's needed, kind of like only like take as much as needed, like from the earth, like from the animals, that kind of thing, if you have to. And then I think also what Rabbi David was saying, which really like resonated with me, was that the worldview in which like many religious texts were written was like much smaller maybe than like what we're interpreting and like kind of growing it into today and like our world's context today. So the way that I know our like Zoroastrian community in like the Midwest kind of is, because my parents are very active as leaders, I know that like we see our religion as kind of like how can we as like humans of this earth like not only like take care of our earth today, but like how can we kind of like plant those seeds like for the future generations in terms of like just sustainability and like with our habits, with our like kind of foundations that we build like for not just religiously but our communities as a whole, to kind of like be sustainable and like economically, I mean like environmentally friendly.
There's something I want to add too, because when they originally asked about the ancient cultures versus now, something with the ancients, they were, the consciousness of the ancient people, they were derived around their tribe and the people that were immediately around them, not necessarily the whole of the world. So it's like something we've like kind of struggled with paganism, is that, what they meant, their ideas that they had back then doesn't necessarily apply to what's going on today, because they had a different outlook and a different way of doing things than how we do it today. Today, we can communicate like we are now to people all over the world. So, we have a broader spectrum of, how to speak to the world, on a universal level versus, just one cultural level or one tribe level. So we know our impact. We know how to, impact the world, what we can do as an individual that affects the whole of the entire world. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next question is for David. Are you still here? I got a message saying that his computer was dying. Rabbi Burstein? Did we lose him? Are you still here?
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah, I'm
I
here.
can. Okay. Okay, great.
Okay, sorry.
Maybe that was another David.
My iPad was dying. I was
Oh,
I
it
had
did die.
to
Okay.
switch over.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
What inspired your form of Judaism to come about?
I think it was a combination of, the idea that science and religion can live together, and that it's important to recognize that to use Iron Age liturgy, or even before the Iron Age liturgy, with 21st century people is challenging. And some of this interventionist type liturgy is really hard for people. Also, the Hebrew was separating a lot of people. It's a very hard language to learn, and it's a very difficult thing to teach. And people were feeling separated by the language itself. So I think it became important to create an alternative for people to feel okay about their Judaism and not feel less than if they couldn't do the religious practices. That's me in a nutshell. Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. The next question is for Brian. Do folks congregate, pray together, and sing together regularly in your tradition?
I wouldn't say regularly. Like I said, the holidays I mentioned earlier, usually we'll either get together with our covens or with, the community of, what we have planned, and, we celebrate them that way. We all have different methods of, ritual. Sometimes we do sing in a lot of them. But I mean, mainly it's for the holidays. And then, or if we have like a personal like coven, or part of our there's also what you call a magical order, and they'll get together on certain days and do ritual together, in honor, the subject matter of what they get together for is, a pretty broad spectrum, whatever they decide they're going to work on at that time. It could be a study group, or it could just be to honoring certain deities. But mostly it's for, the holidays, what we call Sabbats. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. I believe this next question is for everyone on the panel. It seems we are all using the term humanistic to share common values. What in your tradition or practice makes us uniquely human?
We're all stardust. We're all part of, we all come from, as I guess it was Neil deGrasse Tyson said, yeah, we're all cosmic stardust, and we're all made from the same stuff. So we're all part of the earth, and we're here living our lives as individuals, doing what we can to make the best of things through this, what would be considered a short speck of time in the grand scheme of things. And also, how we impact the world around us. We're all interconnected on a spiritual level or astral level, and that way too. So there's this oneness. It's you're one with the universe, and we're all connected. So, just because we have different ideas or different, thoughts or philosophies, we might be individuals in that matter, but that doesn't mean that we're not all interconnected in some manner of some form. That eventually we all came from what I guess you would call a Big Bang, however you want to define God in that matter, and we all came from stardust out of that.
There's a Baha'i concept that God is an unknowable essence and is eternal. Creation, where our sphere, is full of spirit at the plant level, mineral plant level, and animal level. The difference with a human is that we have a rational soul with the capacity to know and love and worship God. Of course, I already said that God is unknowable, so that's sounds like a conundrum. But our task is to acquire divine attributes, spiritual attributes, which we will need not just in this life, but in our eternal future, that will help us. So such things that we can only learn on a material plane. So that's another thing to think about for us. What is the wisdom of having a spiritual being exist on a material plane and acquire spiritual attributes? And when I think about that, I think about, well, this is where you can learn about justice, you can learn about truthfulness. If we were all spirit and we all knew everything about everybody, we wouldn't know when we're being lied to, so that we wouldn't learn what the differences in those sorts of things. But that's just my own personal meditation about that kind of thing. But the fact is that we are the being with the rational soul, with the capacity to know and worship God. I think that's probably pretty complete.
Thank you. The next question is for David. Some of my Jewish friends have no place of worship, no synagogue. They travel from one place of worship to another, as if in the desert traveling to find the promised land. They are very active around justice issues in an attempt to bring about the promised land. Does this sound familiar to you? In other words, does this make sense to you from a secular aspect? David,
yeah.
are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry. Yes, I think it does. It makes a lot of sense to me. Is that not just Jews, but a lot of people are seekers. They're looking for a community where they can feel appreciated and honored and respected. So the desert analogy is interesting, to wander through the desert to get to the promised land. And interestingly enough, in our tradition, like Moses doesn't get to the promised land. He hands it over to the next generation. So I think there are a lot of Jews that are seekers and looking for a place to be. Our congregation actually has many, many of those people that come to it because we love them for who they are. We're not asking them to be something that they may not feel accurately portrays their Judaism. And that I think seeing it that way, I mean, the truth of it kind of ties to the previous question, what do we as humans need to do in this world is to love each other, be compassionate to each other, give each other the benefit of the doubt. I really loved what Shireen and Brian and Deborah are talking about, is like not having excess. I've been kind of horrified by this whole hoarding that's going on around COVID, and realizing that, there are people that need this more than us. Again, I think the humanness, the seekerness, like we're looking to feel seen. And if a religious community, a faith community can see somebody and appreciate them for who they are, then I think it's a great place for you.
Great, thank you so much. Looks like, Debbie, did you have some comments? I'm not sure if this is a question here, but it looks like you might have had some comments about the environmental and climate change issues from your pagan tradition. Did you want to add anything? That I'm just kind of Debbie, are you there?
Are you talking to me? Are you talking to Debbie Lewis?
No, Debbie Lewis.
Yeah, I'm here. As far as like the whole, as with, you know, we're trying to take over Earth, or we're trying to overthrow or overpower Earth. If you look throughout history, if you look at the structures, the way that civilizations were built, it wasn't so much of an overpowerment as of working with what you have and what you got. That's basically what I was trying to say.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. The next question, I think, is for all of the panelists. How does each of your religions describe God? How do each of you or your religions explain spiritual experiences?
So, again, this is a really, more of a personal idea, but I can try to give a broad perspective of it. So, we're extensions of the gods, as they are an extension of us. We kind of feel that, in some cultures, it would be that, we're living this dream of the gods. It's like you have a dream that's so emotional, or you look at a piece of artwork and it drives you like so emotional that, it makes you feel the idea of love or happiness or what have you. And we're kind of like this idea of, we're the God's emotion of that, or the projection of the God's mind from that. And we're living into this idea that, we are a thought of a being greater than us, ideally. Is the best way I can describe it. I mean, it's one of the things that you can't really put into words. It's something that you've got to feel. So like when you have an emotion towards something and it moves you, you're doing the same thing that the gods are doing when, you're having a dream or an idea. And so it's kind of the same idea of, how science describes it. There's several parallel universes, and any action that you have, or thought that you have, it manifests over there on several different planes. So, I mean, that could be a whole, discussion on its own. And the idea of, the spiritual experience is another thing that it isn't really something that you could put words into it, because it's an experience. It's what I might describe as my personal spiritual experience. Somebody else might have the same thing, but it's going to be described different because it's coming from a different point of view. So when you have a spiritual experience, it's something, the best way I could describe it is it's like a switch clicks off, and you're automatically, you're awoken or awakened, and you're aware of everything around you. You're aware of the gods. You're aware of, the energies and the spirits, and how, the spirit or the living idea of the animals or the earth around you, and how you're connected to it. And it's just, I could sit here and describe it all day, but it's like, you know, how do you describe the idea of what love is or what anger is? You know what it does, but actually what it is like a whole nother idea or concept. You know, it's an experience. So that's what I got for that right now.
Okay, thank you. Did anyone else have anything to add to that question?
Yeah, I wanted to say, as I mentioned earlier, the concept of God for Baha'i is as unknowable. So God is creates everything. Well, he's above everything and the son of reality. And the only way, the Baha'is believe the only way we can access God is through the manifestations who reveal teachings from God. And they're the only ones who have had direct connection on any level. And then our job, as I mentioned earlier, is to reflect the light of the Son of Reality. So, and we get that through the manifestations and their teachings. And that is, so a spiritual experience is that reflecting of light and the acquiring of virtues, and what that, it's a long, slow process, or it could happen all of a sudden. So I think that's going to be just going to vary among individuals, but that's sort of the, I would say, process as we understand it.
I can add too, if that's okay. So I would say that our religion kind of really teaches us to sort of, and I think this is probably other religions as well, by the way, but just to kind of like emulate the benevolence of God, like in your everyday behaviors, you know, kind of like behave selflessly, unconditionally, like faithfully, like love each other, kind of like with your good thoughts, good words, and good deeds, which our religion kind of has as one of our sort of phrases that we repeat a lot. And just kind of behaving godlike in whatever ways you can, instead of it being like this force that's so far removed from you, but rather to try and like bring in kind of godlike qualities in your everyday actions toward each other and like strangers and friends alike. That's kind of like maybe my personal perspective of it, but that's how I see it through the lens of my religion.
Great, thank you. The next question is also for the entire panel. If you were not a follower of your path, what path would you follow? Anyone want to take that?
I can speak to that. So I spent the first 17 years of my life as a Protestant. I grew up in a Protestant church, congregational church, left that and became an agnostic atheist for a while, politically active, and until I discovered the Baha'i Faith. And so that's what I've been since I was 19, which is many decades now. I can't conceive of being something else at this point.
I kind of like all the three other panelist religions, actually. I mean, maybe kind of an amalgamation of those would be nice. I mean, it's I love aspects about each of what my colleagues have said. I can't imagine being anything other than Jewish. I do like the concepts and practices, the tenets of Buddhism, and studied that pretty extensively. But I think there's something about finding that path for you. I mean, religions, the way I describe it is we're all climbing the same mountain. We just have different paths. And I'd have to learn the tools of somebody else's path, but we're all trying to go to the same place, which I think is that collection of humanness and compassion and love, all of which is being talked about in all of our traditions. And I just, I keep thinking back to what we're going through as a society. I saw a question about human suffering, like how do we kind of come together as a group? Politically, it's been very hard in our country. There's a lot of divisiveness. And I think it's going to take people and clergy and people of faith to come together and realize that we're in this together. And that the idea of love and compassion and kindness are stronger than anything else we can face. And I've seen acts of that. I've seen it all over the place. If you watch the news and the media, you would think that it's all horrible, but there are people that are really stepping up and being there for each other. So I think that's the religion, that's the part of my religion I love the most. I'm not into the kind of punishing God or the aspects of it that are just, you know, I don't believe in that. I believe that God is a finite, an infinite concept that I have a finite understanding of. And I'm okay with that. That's my faith. I don't need to know everything. But I do know that love and kindness and compassion are the key, for me at least.
Great, thank you so much. Another question for the whole panel. I'm going to try to get through these last questions quickly since I know we're a little after 7 right now. How do each of you view the source of human suffering? Does anyone want to take that one?
So from, I guess from my understanding of Baha'i teachings, we suffer to the extent that we're ignoring the message of God, basically. If we are to be truthful, if we are to be just and fair, if we are to be loving and kind, well, we could suffer because other people aren't living on that same level. But it's more likely that we're not living on that level that creates suffering. I think, and I say that because I think that if you can take the hit if you have faith. I think you can take these hits from, let's say, from the pandemic, from somebody dying, from people treating you badly, from losing your job, from losing all your money. If you have a different perception of what life is about. If you think life is about gathering material goods, being famous, being powerful and all those things, being young, whatever, and you don't have those things, and that might make you suffer if those are the important things to you. But I think if your goal is to be close to God, then in a sense, suffering brings you closer.
So I can add to that. That was nice, Deborah. So something that one of our kind of customs in our religion is called a navjot, and that's very analogous to like a bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, kind of when children are, or anybody, but when you're kind of accepted or inducted into the religion. And at that time, you're given this kind of like garment that you wear, an undergarment shirt. And there's like some symbolic messages as part of that garment. And part of that is kind of this pocket that's supposed to collect like your good deeds, or like not that like you should be doing it like for that recognition, but like there's this symbol of a pocket that is like to collect like the good thoughts or the good words or the good deeds that you kind of exude to your surroundings every day. And so our religion kind of like emphasizes this idea of like self-determination and choice. Like you have the choice in every moment to kind of like choose like between like maybe good and evil, like to put it in a binary way, but to just kind of like choose like how you want to handle a situation, like with grace or maybe like not with grace. And I don't honestly know much like about the suffering part, but I think that this idea of this choice that's kind of ingrained in us from a young age kind of goes along that route, but I don't know exactly how to speak to it in terms of the suffering part.
Great, thank you. Looks like there's just one more question. Do you think this panel has made you want to find more similarities between different paths and faith traditions?
I want to say thank you, Geneva, for having this panel. The Festival of Faiths actually is thinking of this format, or the Misconceptions and Truths, as maybe a kickoff event for next year's festival. So I was hoping to see some of them on here. I don't recognize any names of anybody from that committee. But since, the past few years, I think that learning about other faiths and finding similarities among paths here in Cincinnati has been tremendous. The experience that I've only lived here almost 4 years, but the experiences we've had here have just been almost mind-boggling in sort of how quickly it's gathering, and the kinds of connections we're making with people of various faiths, some of whom are of other religions are here in the audience, quietly not putting their pictures up and so on. But there's people that I've met over these years that it's been amazing. So it's just wonderful to create these connections and these friendships. And I'm heartened by that. And I think it's accelerating. I think it's a model that will probably spread through the country and then hopefully through the world.
I agree with Deborah, and I want to thank the rest of the panelists. I mean, to spend an evening, not only with the people that are listening, but to spend an evening with other people of faith to kind of talk about our humanity is a really nice thing. I too live in Cincinnati, and Deborah and I kind of run in the same circles, so we see each other once in a while, but it really is. And what I try to tell my people that I talk to is that just like this virus spreads exponentially, so does kindness and love and connection. And we're learning that in real time. And I believe that that's what makes us resilient as humans, is our ability to love each other and be kind to each other. Even when suffering's coming, that we're able to find that moment of connection. So I think that things like this that you did, Geneva, thank you, prove that. And also that we're not alone, and that everyone, we're really not alone in this experience, because everyone in the world is experiencing it at the same time. And I think it'll bring us together in our humanity. So thank you very much for making this space. And thank you to my colleagues.
Thank you all. That was really wonderful, really enlightening.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. And thank you I know we've lost some people, but the people who are still on the call, does anyone have anything they want to add? Any last thoughts or comments? I know that this is a time of isolation for everyone, and I want people to feel connected, and that's a big part of why we're doing this. So if anybody wants to add any last thoughts or comments before we end, please feel free to do so.
Yes, Geneva, may I say something?
Yes, of course.
My name is Becca, and I'm a Zoroastrian. We live in Fairfield, a suburb of Cincinnati. And I just want to say that through all this that we heard today, it just reinforces our belief in humanity, in each other, that how similar we all are. We are so much more like one another, different from one another. And we can shed the differences that of fear and ignorance about each other's religions and languages and cultures. One another would be the new world more happier, peaceful place to live in. It was really a beautiful event. Under the circumstances, it was very uplifting to attend this. Thank you so much, all the panelists also.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to hear that. Does anyone else have any other comments they'd like to add, or last minute questions for the panelists?
I'd like to just say that you have our email addresses, and if people, I can only speak for myself, but people want to continue this conversation, it's part of my spiritual practice to spread this word, and I would welcome any questions. You can send me an email and we can continue the conversation, because I think it's really important. It's going to get scarier before it gets better, and I think now's the time where we kind of hunker down and double down on the kindness and love and compassion and being there for each other. Mm-hmm. So speaking of that, I have 3 children that are going to might burn the upstairs of my house down at this point in time. So I'm going to say goodbye. And Becky, you should be very proud of your daughter, just to let you know. And we will see everyone soon.
So much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And if anyone is interested in his making that email connection, I believe I sent an email out to everyone who registered for this call today, so just reach out to me and I'll make those connections. Was there anyone else who wanted to say anything before we go?
No, you can share my email too.
Okay.
And just thanking everybody who came and all the ones who have left already, who I can't thank.
Okay.
And thank you
Anyone
for
else?
arranging it.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
You're most welcome. Thank you all for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you. Mhm.
All right, everyone, have a good night. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Yeah.
And we hope you'll join us on April 7th for our next panel on care for creation. Okay? Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.